WWE produced a 24 episode on Drew McIntyre called WWE 24 Drew McIntyre The Chosen One, and of course that references when he first debuted in 2010. Vince McMahon introduced him as The Chosen One, and they wanted to push him big, but it didn't work back then. So it starts off him in Tampa, Florida, like he's in the parking lot close to Raymond James Stadium, where of course WrestleMania 36 was supposed to take place, and maybe WrestleMania 37 is going to take place, I'm not sure. But that's where the documentary starts. He's in his car. It's kind of sad. It's like watching someone go into... it's like with him. If you ever seen the first Rocky movie, remember he goes into the arena where he's supposed to fight Apollo Creed the night before? It felt like that's what they were going to do with Drew before he fights Brock, but it's just not going to work out. So it's kind of sad. It's like he's looking at the thing he was supposed to be at, but he never could actually wrestle in the main event of WrestleMania 36 in Raymond James Stadium. So we see Drew in Aya, Scotland. This is where he was born. It's kind of cool seeing him there. It's like an old European small town. I like looking at those. I think we saw a little bit of that in other documentaries. I think Finn's documentary saw him there. This is Scotland, of course. It's very tiny, I have to say. I like hearing about Drew, hearing about his him growing up. So his mother had a weird condition where she couldn't balance herself right, and she was told not to have Drew when she was pregnant. She was even told to abort the baby. She never did. She wanted to have him, and she had Drew. And that's crazy because if she doesn't have him, there's no Drew McIntyre ever in this world. Then I don't know what he talked about his mother. I'm not sure what her condition is. We haven't got there, but his father is alive and his brother is there, and they're just talking about him being a huge wrestling fan. So there was no wrestling in the UK when he wanted to get there, so he had to. He's actually in Scotland, so he had to go into London, actually, England, and he went to wrestle there, and I think it was 12 hours the time. So I guess he talked to Sheamus. He got to WWE tryout in 2007, April 23rd. So this would probably be a few weeks after WrestleMania 23. This is actually, you know what this is? This is the time in 2007. This is the London tour they do after, or the European tour they do after WrestleMania each year. And this was probably the same weekend or the same night that Shawn Michaels and John Cena had that classic match that blew away the WrestleMania match on Raw. A lot of the wrestlers get in. I think Sheamus gets signed. Drew McIntyre gets signed. And Wade Barrett, I think he got signed. So a lot of big names got signed. We see Drew McIntyre in 2007. I don't remember this at all. I can't remember this. I was watching wrestling. I took a break from wrestling in like 06, 07 because it got bad. But I can't remember seeing Drew McIntyre in 2007. This is news to me. Because I remember him. I remember the first time he debuted in 09 when Vince McMahon introduced him. But I'm surprised. I don't remember this. So it takes him a couple of years, and he's back in FCW. He needs more time. And then in 2009, Vince sees him. He was there, and Vince likes him so much, he did even put him on ECW. ECW is where all the developmental guys would go. They just moved him up to the main roster, and in September 25th, 2009, Vince McMahon comes out, and he announces the chosen one, Drew McIntyre. And looking back, when Vince first announced him, to go back, my reaction to that was... I remember even talking to people I knew who liked wrestling. I remember even talking about like a message, or we were thinking if Vince McMahon's taking his time to introduce someone, which he never does. He really never brings in people. He'll never introduce anyone. It's very rare that he ever would. If he's taking the time, they have something planned for this guy. We were thinking to ourselves, this guy's going to be huge. And after a month or two, they had him feel with R-Truth at first. Not really. He just felt like they're just shoving this guy down our throats. And we even learned that there's even such a thing in OVW that a lot of them were pissed off at him and they resented him. When he was booked on the road for the main roster, they were even angry at him that he was getting this opportunity. Even they did this thing where Paul Burchill was angry at him. Next, I want to go into this really sad part of the story. I have to talk about this. This happened in 2012. This is really sad. This is probably one of the saddest parts. Heartbreaking real life stories over here. In 2012, Drew flew home to Scotland upon hearing that his mother was really sick. It felt like his world had collapsed when doctors then told him that his family told him and his family that she had 3 days to live. McIntyre was just found that really hard to process, and he couldn't fathom life without his mother. It's seriously tough to watch Drew relive the pain when he experienced in watching women he admired more than more than anyone. He said it in me. There's no one in the world he admired more. One night when no one was around, he locked eyes with Angela from her bedside. She couldn't speak, but he did, and he's eternally grateful that he had that moment to express his love for her. When she passed, it left a hole in his heart. His pro wrestling career suffered the knock-out effects of his personal agony, and he starts drinking more, and he starts to mask the sorrow he was feeling. And I did not know that. That made sure I'm really that's man, it makes you think of the guy differently, not in a bad way, but sympathetic light. I never knew he went through drinking. It must have been tough because his mother dies in 2012, and he has to fly all the way back into the United States. And he goes back to the United States. He leaves home from Scotland with his mom gone. He's just depressed. He drank, and he was devastated mentally, and it was horrible for his career. And I really, really felt bad for this guy. So, of course, things progress. Next is he goes into 3MB with Heath Slater and Jinder Mahal. The three of them do it. It's, some people like 3MB. Drew's repping it, of course, but, when I look back, I thought they were pretty fun. It was weird. I remember at that time you had three major factions. Well, never not a major faction. You had three factions on TV. You had the Shield, which was Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Ambrose. Those guys were great. And you had the Wyatt family, which was Bray Wyatt, Luke Harper, and Eric Rowan. And then the third faction you'd have weekly, you'd see all three of these factions, was 3MB, which is Slater, McIntyre, and Mahal. It's a disaster. It just sucked. I think Drew probably looked at it was probably the least enthused doing it, if I can remember, because Jinder wasn't doing anything, and Heath, that was what he was, just a comedy guy, so he probably liked it, but it was flopping. So they have 3MB continue to do that, to continue to be on TV. They're just jobbers. They lose all the time. And I remember things got really, really bad for Drew. I think the lowest part of his career by far was in 2014, and when he has to job to El Torito. I saw El Torito beat Drew McIntyre on TV multiple times. He beat Jinder as well. It was just embarrassing. They were basically having 3MB in the middle of the feud in 2014, in the middle of the feud with two midgets. It was Hornswoggle was feuding with El Torito, and they would have Hornswoggle and El Torito feud. They'd have them wrestle. It was just the worst thing ever. It was two midgets wrestling. And then on Torito's side, he had the Los Matadores, who I think those guys released. That's Primo and Epico. And then on Hornswoggle's side, it was 3MB. And they would have him bump, and they'd have multiple times seeing McIntyre lose to El Torito, just embarrassing. Then, of course, he would lose. Then they had the TLC match, and Drew was pumping all the WLC match, and Drew was bumping all over the place. And it wasn't too long after that, Drew was released, and he turned his career after he was released. It became it was tough, and it basically wasn't all the kick-ass redemption stories in ICW Evolve, WCW, WCPW, where he was there. He just moved into an apartment with his now wife, Caitlin, and WWE called to let him know they were terminating his contract. The ongoing misery of his mother's death sent him to a dark path of more alcohol and poor decisions. It was devastating for him that he lost his job now. He just moved into an apartment with his wife. He then pulled his nose up and became the man he needed to be. I didn't want to mention this, but they kind of glossed over what happened with Taryn Terrell. I think he married her briefly in 2010, then they got into a fight, and I think that hurt him with Vince. I don't want to, it's kind of unfortunate to mention this, but what happened with Taryn, I think when she assaulted him, I think it hurt Vince, he'll look at you differently, as a man if you get beat up, and I think she hit him. I forget the whole story. I think that might have hurt Vince, but going back to Caitlin, she played a huge role in him turning his life around. His father's even shown on 24th personally thanking Caitlin during a Zoom call after he won the title for taking care of his son. He admits he needed to fall on his ass to get back up again. I thought that was a really great story. And I didn't know this. There's another interesting tidbit. There's even a hidden relief of his broken neck. Someone But Kalen confesses on 24 that a tiny part of her looked on the bright side following his injury in 2016. He got 8 full weeks at home, and I guess he had a neck injury, and he was wrestling really hard, and he had a bad neck injury. I had no idea this was going on, and he basically had a hidden relief on his broken neck for a while he was wrestling, which man, that was just, I did not know that. And the guy, he says he was motivated more than anything on the Indies was Brock Lesnar. So he wanted to wrestle Brock, and he was the guy he admired and he wanted to get in the ring with. So they described his story. He basically, it's weird because he envisioned a match with Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 36 as when years before it happened, he'd constantly asked himself what the perfect match would be, and Brock jumped in front of his mind every time. He wanted Lesnar at Mania, and he pictured a moment during workouts to help motivate himself. It became akin to an obsession. He vividly remembered backstage at Raw hearing Ricochet say, "Oh, cool," years later when he turned around. Drew saw a graphic of his match at WrestleMania 36 with Brock flashing up on the monitor, and it took him a while to sit down for a second and take it all in. I guess he had envisioned that graphic in his mind for many years. So, he eventually, he comes into NXT in 2017. They use him for a bit. His run in NXT was uneventful. He had a match with Bobby Roode that wasn't very good. Then he lost a belt to Andrade. I remember that. Then he gets hurt in the match with Andrade. We don't see him until the night after WrestleMania 34. He's introduced, and he's in a tag team with Dolph Ziggler, and it's average. It's okay. He's there for a while. He wrestles with Ziggler, and then eventually they split up. And I was thinking to myself, they're going to set up a match with Dolph and Drew at Mania 35, but that never happened. Eventually they split up. Drew, at that time, I remember him just being a part of the worst tag team, the worst faction ever. It was him, Baron Corbin, and Bobby Lashley. If he thinks 3MB was bad, those guys were a million times worse than 3MB. But Drew, they feuded the Shield. They lose, of course. Then he begins a feud with Roman Reigns. He loses to Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 35. From there on, Drew is, he's just kind of in the mid-card for a while. The year, man, it was kind of forgettable that year in 2019 before his rise to the main event again. He'd lose a few more matches until finally he really started to gain momentum, I think, around the fall. The winter is when he really gained momentum. He starts to get over. He cut a really good promo on Raw before the Royal Rumble, and then he goes into the Rumble, and he looks like $1 million in that match. One of the best moments of that whole match is when he's in there, and Brock's in the Rumble. He was Universal Champ. He's a WWE Champ. He's in the Rumble, and he kicks Brock Lesnar's head off. He hits him with the most brutal Claymore kick. Brock's out. Brock sold it great. Brock's unconscious. Drew stands over him from the ring. It was probably one of the best visuals of the year. I thought that was awesome. Eventually, he challenges Brock Lesnar for the WWE title at WrestleMania. And, we see the footage of him being disappointed. I feel like I've seen this so many times because I think they've done a couple of documentaries already on Drew. I think they did one, I think it was a Chronicle on Drew when he finds out the news. And it sucks. He loses the WrestleMania main event with Brock Lesnar. He can't main event with Brock. He can't go to WrestleMania 36 in front of 70,000 people in Raymond James Stadium, defeat Brock. And instead, it gets moved to the Performance Center. He's angry. He's sad. He's unhappy. He's bitter. But I think what he explains it well. What I think makes him look good is he understands the gravity of the situation. When he realizes how so many people are suffering from COVID-19 and coronavirus, he realizes that it's causing so much pain and sorrow that he just accepts, and he thinks to himself, well, who am I to complain about a wrestling match? And he begins to embrace it. Eventually, his match with Brock is moved to the Performance Center on night 2 for the WWE title at WrestleMania 36. Wouldn't have been the way he wanted, but eventually he has a match with Brock. It's a quick match. He beats him. I think if they were in the stadium, they would have had a much different match. I think they would have had a longer match for sure, but he beats Brock in 5 minutes. It's just, he hits a Claymore. Brock kicks 3 of 5s. Drew kicks out, then Drew hits a few more Claymores, and the match is over. It's just a Brock Lesnar sprint. Drew McIntyre wins the belt at WrestleMania 36. He's the champ. Great moment for him. They continue to see what's next for Drew after this. He feuded with Rollins, and he had the feud with Randy, which he's currently in. He has a Hell in a Cell match with them in a few weeks. So I thought this was a very good documentary. It made Drew look good. I enjoyed it overall, and I'd recommend watching it. And we'll see what's next for this guy. a great story for Drew, for where he was when he was released in 2014. When you told me he was released, I would have laughed in your face. Would you have told me 6 years later he's going to main event WrestleMania and he's going to beat Brock Lesnar in the main event? Would have never believed you, but it happened.